Around several weeks back, I released a video discussing a possible Elder Scrolls 6 leak, basically saying that the game could be set in Valenwood. In hindsight, I admit I was probably a little bit overexcited about the entire thing, and I did jump to some conclusions in that video, so today I'd like to follow up the previous video with a more skeptical view on the whole potential leak. Most of you will probably recall the memo you're seeing on the screen right now as the centerpiece of this leak, as it's supposedly an official Bethesda document that was leaked in 2014. Pretty much what I was trying to say in the last video is that this memo has to be legit because it has the term Fallout Nuka World listed on the memo, and Fallout Nuka World was recently confirmed to be a real DLC, meaning Project Greenheart, which is also listed on this memo, is legit as well. Given that Greenheart is a city in Valenwood, Project Greenheart is most likely the codename for the Elder Scrolls 6, which implies that the Elder Scrolls 6 is going to be set in Valenwood. I'm going to leave a link to that video in the description, by the way, and I do highly recommend checking it out before watching this video because otherwise a lot of the points I make aren't going to make too much sense. With all that said, let's go ahead and take a deeper look at this memo. One of the biggest concerns from the last video was whether or not this memo is actually from 2014, since someone could easily have just made it today in 2016 and put a 2014 timestamp on the document, and it would seem like the document came from 2014. Normally this would be a valid point, but there are news articles and coverage videos from 2014 discussing the memo, so it is indeed confirmed to be from 2014. Whether or not the document itself is fake or not still remains to be seen, but it was definitely first leaked in 2014. I'll leave a couple of links in the description to more resources for confirmation in case you guys want to learn more about the issue. Despite the fact that the document is indeed from 2014, there are still some rather sketchy things about it. It seems like this memo was distributed to Bethesda employees for them to hold on to, and then was somehow leaked when either an employee lost it and it was picked up by someone else, or that employee decided to leak it themselves. But here's the thing, this document has some really important and quite frankly confidential information on it, so why would Bethesda even risk giving it out in the first place to their employees? An employee could easily lose the document or just decide to leak pictures of it, and Bethesda would pretty much be screwed. The way I see it, if Bethesda really wanted to keep these projects listed confidential, why not just have the employees sign a document before E3 saying they wouldn't disclose anything, and then Bethesda themselves would keep a copy of the document as opposed to the employees? Also, I question whether a Bethesda employee would even bother leaking this in the first place because they would definitely get fired. If you're working at Bethesda and you had this on your hands, would you want to risk your job? I don't think so. So not only should Bethesda have not released this document in the first place, but even if they did, employees wouldn't risk releasing it. At the very top of the document, we see the logos of 3 companies in Bethesda Softworks, Bethesda Game Studios, and ZeniMax Media. This actually makes sense because Bethesda Game Studios is the developer of Fallout and Elder Scrolls, Bethesda Softworks is the publishing company, and finally ZeniMax is the parent company of Bethesda Game Studios. On the other hand, this document actually has a couple of minor grammatical errors, which I'm not going to go ahead and point out specifically, but if you read through it yourself, you'll notice that they are there. This isn't an official legal document and is more of a memo, so it doesn't necessarily need to have perfect grammar, but this is still really sketchy. Also, the use of Mr. Hines in place of Pete's full name, as in Mr. Pete Hines, is a little strange since even though this isn't an official legal document, you'd still expect it to list a person's full legal name. Let's now take a look at the list of terms employees are prohibited from mentioning, which is definitely the most important part of this document. At E3, Fallout Nuka World was announced as the last DLC for Fallout 4, which gives this document a higher chance of being legitimate. This memo, which was made in 2014, whether it's fake or not, lists Fallout Nuka World as a future Bethesda project, meaning either the document is 100% legit, or the person who made this hoax somehow came up with the term Nuka World, and then Bethesda independently decided to name the next Fallout 4 DLC, Nuka World. I want to emphasize here that 2 people independently coming up with the same idea is incredibly rare. There are quite literally an infinite number of different concepts you can think of for Fallout 4 DLC, and also an infinite number of names you could give to each of these infinite possibilities, so the chances of both the hoax maker and Bethesda independently coming up with the same name is highly unlikely. At the same time, it's not entirely out of the question, and given what we've discussed so far, the legitimacy of the document is also rather unlikely. One possibility that could reconcile all of this is that Bethesda saw this document themselves and decided to call their DLC Nuka World as a joke of sorts. Bethesda does actually pay attention to these types of things, which is evident in the fact that a fan bought Fallout 4 using only bottle caps from them, and it would be a pretty funny way for them to troll their fans. Another problem with this document is that instead of listing Nuka World as a Fallout 4 DLC, it just says Fallout Nuka World as if it's some sort of independent project. This is also very strange, and it almost makes it seem as if the Nuka World listed in this document is different from the official Fallout 4 DLC. One way we could explain this is that Bethesda initially intended to use the Nuka World concept for a completely different project, which ended up not panning out, but then they decided to recycle the idea and reuse it for a Fallout 4 DLC. Perhaps Fallout Shelter was originally supposed to be a mobile game set in a post-apocalyptic amusement park, as is the case with Nuka World, and was set to be called Fallout Nuka World instead of Fallout Shelter, but Bethesda came up with the current idea for Fallout Shelter and decided to use that instead because maybe they thought it was a better idea for a mobile game. But of course, they still had the idea lying around, and they decided to reuse it for a Fallout 4 DLC. In my opinion, the concept of a game in an amusement park is much better for a mobile game, and I would almost say that the concept for Fallout Nuka World fits a mobile game better than a Fallout 4 DLC. This explanation definitely doesn't remove all suspicion, but it does provide a plausible alternative. One concern brought up by many in my last video upon seeing this memo is that if Project Greenheart is indeed a reference to the Elder Scrolls 6, why does Bethesda refer to the Elder Scrolls 6 twice on this list? Well, here's the thing guys, what Bethesda is listing is just a set of terms, not games. The document says, and I quote, "Please be aware that you are prohibited from using and/or referencing the following terms, not games." In support of this, Bethesda lists Fallout and Elder Scrolls amongst the terms, which aren't games in themselves, they're franchises. So this list is not a list of games, but rather just a list of terms that employees are forbidden to mention, and just because the Elder Scrolls 6 is already listed once, doesn't mean there can't be multiple references to it. Bethesda does like to give alternative codenames to all of their projects, as with Fallout 4 we had the codename Institute, so Project Greenheart could just be an alternative codename for the Elder Scrolls 6, and if this were the case, Bethesda wouldn't want employees mentioning either term. Another thing I like to clarify at the end here pertains not to the memo itself, but rather something I said in my previous video. At the beginning of that video, I said, "So I've actually covered a couple of supposed Elder Scrolls 6 leaks in the past couple of months already, and so far none of those leaks have really even been close to legit." Unfortunately, this was rather unclear, and I'd like to clarify that what I meant to say is I've covered a couple of leaks in the past, but the conclusion I came to in all those coverage videos is that those leaks were all hoaxes. Basically, I was trying to debunk those leaks. If you don't believe me, I'll leave some more links down below for further research in case you guys are interested in checking that out. The final problem I have with this memo is that Bethesda is confirmed to be working on 2 brand new projects that we've never seen before, and yet on the memo, there's absolutely no mention of these projects. If this memo were actually legit, I'd imagine Bethesda would have at least listed something directing employees to not discuss these projects. 2014 is a while back, and perhaps they hadn't really started to work on these new projects in earnest, but at the very least Bethesda must have had some idea of their future plans to do these projects. This to me is arguably the sketchiest detail of the entire memo. In sum, my revised opinion on this leak is that it's one of the more reasonable ones that we've gotten for the Elder Scrolls 6, but there are still so many issues with it that I really can't write it off as legitimate beyond a reasonable doubt for now. We should definitely keep it in the back of our minds, but not take it at face value until more information on the Elder Scrolls 6 is revealed. Alright guys, well that's pretty much all I wanted to say on that previous video. I hope this gave a bit of a different perspective on the whole thing, and I hope you guys got something out of this video. As always, if you enjoyed, be sure to drop me a like down below and subscribe to my channel if you haven't already for more Elder Scrolls 6 videos in the future. Otherwise, I hope you all have an awesome rest of your day, and I will see you in my next video.